I'm Professor Vivian Holloway, 72 years young. My children banished me to eat alone in the garage during a family dinner. They mistook my quiet dignity for decline. They didn't realize this old historian was about to meticulously auction off their inheritance and write my own triumphant final chapter an ocean away. Before I begin my story, I just want to say thank you for listening as I pour my heart out. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I love hearing from you. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me more than you know. And if you'd like to share your story with me, feel free to email it. I'll drop my email in the comments and description below. Now let me tell you what really happened. I'm Vivian Holloway, 72, a widowed history professor. My old Victorian home was my cherished sanctuary, an archive of our life. My children, Reginald and Lena, and their partners, however, began to view my world through a modern, materialistic lens that deeply unsettled me. Lately, that wind seemed to be blowing with increasing force through my house, carrying with it their not-so-subtle appraisals. Their visits, often for Sunday dinners I still insisted on hosting, had begun to feel less like family gatherings and more like scouting expeditions. Mother Holloway, Chantal would begin, her voice dripping with a syrupy concern that never quite masked the flint in her eyes. This old place really is quite something. Such potential. She'd run a perfectly manicured finger along Henry's beloved oak mantelpiece, then glance at it as if expecting to find dust, though I kept the house impeccably. Of course, it would need a complete overhaul to bring it into the 21st century. Reggie and I were just saying, those original pocket doors are lovely, but a more open-plan concept would be so much better for entertaining our friends. Reggie would nod sagely, his gaze sweeping the room. She's right, Mom. And the market in this neighborhood is booming. We should probably get a proper valuation done soon just for insurance purposes, you know. And to understand its, future possibilities. Future possibilities. My future or theirs. I, the retired historian, was quite adept at interpreting subtext. Their condescending help, as I'd begun to mentally label it, was becoming a regular feature. Reggie had assisted me in consolidating my bank accounts online last year, citing security concerns for someone your age. Now he received duplicate statements, just to keep an eye on things for you, Mom, make sure no one's taking advantage. The irony was not lost on me, though I held my tongue. Lena and Greg would offer to declutter my study, their eyes lingering a little too long on the first editions Henry had collected, or the antique maps I still used for my own quiet research. You have so many things, Mom, Lena would say gently. Wouldn't you be more comfortable with less stuff? They spoke of my intellect in the past tense, as if retirement had also signaled the atrophy of my mind. Mom used to be so sharp with dates, Reggie might say to Greg with a knowing wink if I momentarily fumbled for a name. Chantal would explain complex current events to me in slow, simple terms, as if addressing a particularly dim-witted child. They underestimated me, this new generation so focused on the shiny and new that they couldn't see the enduring strength of old foundations, or the keenness of a mind that had spent a lifetime dissecting human nature through the lens of history. They saw a 72-year-old widow, a bit eccentric perhaps with her books and her old-fashioned ways, and assumed I was gently fading, an obstacle to be managed until they could claim what they clearly already considered theirs. My unease was a constant, low hum beneath the surface of our interactions. I loved my children, of course I did. I remembered Reggie's passionate undergraduate thesis on Renaissance art, Lena's early brilliant watercolor sketches. Where had those bright, engaged young people gone, replaced by these grasping, appraising adults? Was it Chantal's influence on Reggie? Was it simply the modern preoccupation with material wealth? Or had I, in my own quiet academic world, failed to see the flaws in their characters developing? I tried to steer conversations back to memories of Henry, to the values we'd shared, hoping to rekindle some sense of familial piety, of connection beyond the square footage of this house or the balance in my bank account. But their eyes would glaze over. Henry was the past. They were focused on a future that I increasingly suspected had very little room for me in it, except as the current temporary custodian of their anticipated inheritance. The upcoming family dinner, a large affair I was hosting to celebrate my granddaughter Lily's, Reggie and Chantal's 7-year-old, piano recital achievement, felt particularly fraught. Chantal had taken over most of the guest list, inviting many of her own important friends. We need to make it a proper celebration for Lily. Show her what success looks like, Mother Holloway, she declared, as if my usual home-cooked Sunday roast wasn't proper. I had a sinking feeling that my role in this proper celebration was about to be unpleasantly redefined. They saw an old professor, perhaps a little dusty like her books. They were about to learn that history and historians have a tendency to deliver very sharp, very enduring lessons. The day of Lily's piano recital celebration arrived with a flurry of activity that felt alien in my usually quiet, book-lined home. Chantal, my daughter-in-law, had indeed invited a horde of her important friends, people whose names I didn't recognize and whose loud, self-assured laughter already seemed to be bouncing off Henry's beloved bookshelves with a jarring dissonance. I had spent the morning preparing what I could, my famous lemon herb chicken, a large salad with dressing from Henry's old recipe, hoping that at least the food would be a reminder of genuine family warmth. Lily, my 7-year-old granddaughter, Reggie and Chantal's child, looked sweet in her recital dress, though she seemed a little overwhelmed by the fuss her mother was making. As guests began to arrive, their expensive perfumes warring with the scent of roasting chicken, Chantal pulled me aside, her smile tight, her eyes like chips of ice. Reggie hovered behind her, looking uncomfortable but offering no support. Lena and Greg, my daughter and son-in-law, were already expertly mingling as if they hadn't a care in the world. Mother Holloway, Chantal began, her voice a low, conspiratorial hiss. We have a slight situation with the seating. With so many of our dearest friends and Lily's little schoolmates, the dining room is simply overflowing. Absolutely packed. I frowned. Oh, I thought we had enough chairs. I can always bring in the one from my study. No, that won't be necessary, she cut in smoothly. What we've decided, and it really is for the best to give everyone more elbow room and you a bit of peace from the din, is that you'll have your dinner in the garage. We've set up a lovely little card table for you there. It's much quieter and you can just relax and enjoy your meal without all the commotion. The garage. My garage. The place where Henry stored his old tools, where paint cans gathered dust, where the faint smell of oil and forgotten projects lingered. They wanted me, Vivian Holloway, retired professor of history, the matriarch of this family, the owner of this house, to eat my dinner. A dinner I had largely prepared in the garage, like some stray animal not fit for company. The garage. I repeated, my voice barely a whisper, the shock of it rendering me momentarily speechless. Chantal, Reggie, you can't be serious. Reggie finally spoke, his gaze skittering away from mine. Now, Mom, don't make a fuss. It's more practical this way. More space for the guest. You know how you like your peace and quiet anyway. Peace and quiet? I felt a tremor of fury begin in my chest. Or is it that your mother, in her 72 years, has become an embarrassment to your important friends, an eyesore at your perfectly curated celebration for Lily? Chantal's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. We just want what's best for everyone, Mother Holloway. And a fuss will only upset Lily on her special day. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. Comply or you'll be the one to ruin your granddaughter's celebration. Defeated by their united callous front and not wanting to cause a scene that would indeed upset my granddaughter, I allowed myself to be led, not by them but by my own heavy heart, towards the garage door. They'd set up a rickety card table draped with a paper cloth and a single folding chair. A plate with a hurried portion of chicken and salad sat there, already cooling in the drafty air. The door to the kitchen was propped open a few inches, allowing the sounds of their laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the murmur of sophisticated conversation to drift in, a constant, cruel reminder of my banishment. I sat there alone, amidst the shadows and the scent of dust and old gasoline, trying to swallow a mouthful of cold chicken that tasted like ashes. Each burst of laughter from the dining room felt like a lash. This was my home. These were my children. And I was an outcast. A few minutes into my solitary, humiliating meal, the garage door from the garden creaked open and Lily, her face bright, peered in. Grandma, what are you doing out here? Mommy said you were feeling poorly and needed to be quiet. Before I could answer, before I could shield her from the ugliness, she skipped further in, then stopped, looking around at the stored lawnmower, the stacks of old newspapers. It's a bit spooky in here, Grandma, she said, then with the devastating, unthinking cruelty only a child can deliver, she added, Daddy told Mommy he wishes you'd go to heaven soon so he can have your big house and we can get a pool. Is that why you're out here waiting for heaven? The words, so innocently delivered, so monstrous in their implication, struck me with the force of a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. My son, Reggie, wished me dead. For a house. For a swimming pool. He was discussing it with Chantal in front of my granddaughter. The garage, the cold food, their feigned concern, it all paled in comparison to this raw, brutal truth. Lily, oblivious to the devastation she had wrought, soon skipped back to the party. I sat there, frozen, the fork clattering from my numb fingers. So this was it. This was their heart's true desire. I wasn't just an embarrassment. I was an obstacle, a lingering presence keeping them from what they truly wanted. Somehow I finished my meal, or pretended to. Later, much later, after their guest had departed, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and empty wine bottles, Chantal breezed into the kitchen where I was numbly staring out the window. "Well, that was a success," she trilled, oblivious or indifferent to my state. She gestured vaguely at the dining room, now a chaotic landscape of dirty dishes, crumpled napkins and half-empty glasses. "Vivian, dear," she said, her voice bright and utterly devoid of any consideration, "be a love and clear these dishes, won't you? And the kitchen is a disaster. My feet are simply killing me after playing hostess all day." Reggie and Lena and even Greg were nowhere to be seen, likely having retired to congratulate themselves on a successful evening. They left me, their mother, the one they had banished to the garage, the one whose death my son apparently longed for, to clean the entire mess of their indulgent, self-serving dinner. The humiliation was absolute, a cold, hard stone in the pit of my stomach. But beneath it, something else was beginning to stir. Not just fury, but a chillingly clear academic resolve. They had made their calculations. Now it was my turn to make mine. The last of Chantal's important friends finally departed well after midnight, their laughter and superficial chatter fading into the quiet suburban street. I heard Reggie and Chantal, Lena and Greg moving about upstairs, their voices low, likely congratulating themselves on the success of Lily's recital celebration. A celebration from which I, the hostess and grandmother, had been so cruelly and deliberately excluded. Then silence. They had retired, leaving behind the wreckage of their feast for me to contend with. My kitchen, usually a place of comforting order and the scent of whatever historical recipe I was experimenting with, was a disaster zone. Plates piled high, smeared with expensive pâté and remnants of my lemon herb chicken, which they'd apparently deigned to serve to their real guests. Wine glasses stained crimson, cutlery strewn about. The sheer, unthinking disrespect of it, after banishing me to the garage, after Lily's innocent, soul-crushing revelation, was a final, bitter insult. As I moved mechanically, scraping plates, rinsing glasses, the hot water scalding my hands, Lily's words played on a relentless loop in my mind. "Daddy told Mommy he wishes you'd go to heaven soon so he can have your big house and we can get a pool. My son. My Reggie. The boy whose childhood I had filled with stories of heroes and honor, whose university education Henry and I had sacrificed for. He wished me dead. Not in a fit of momentary anger, but as a calm conversational point with his wife, a practical consideration for their future acquisition of a swimming pool. The garage incident had been a profound humiliation, a calculated act of social erasure. Being made to clean up their mess afterwards was a demeaning assertion of their power over me, treating me like an unpaid servant. But Lily's words, they were something else entirely. They were a glimpse into the abyss of their hearts, a chilling confirmation that I was no longer seen as their mother, their grandmother, a human being with feelings and a life of her own. I was merely an obstacle, a stubborn old woman clinging to an asset they coveted. My continued existence was an inconvenience to their lifestyle aspirations. My academic training, my years as a historian spent dissecting motivations, analyzing cause and effect, understanding the often brutal machinations of power and greed throughout human history, kicked in with a cold, dispassionate clarity. I looked at my children, at their spouses, not as family, but as subjects of a rather grim study. Their behavior was a classic case of avarice eroding familial bonds, of entitlement festering into a monstrous disregard for basic human decency. They had, in their own small domestic way, become tyrants and I, their perceived subject. I thought of Henry, my dear brilliant Henry. We had built this house together, room by room, book by book. It wasn't just a structure. It was the repository of our shared life, our love, our intellectual passions. He would be horrified, utterly devastated to know that his children, our children, saw it merely as a commodity, a stepping stone to a swimming pool, its current occupant a bothersome delay in their acquisition plans. His memory, our memory, deserved better than to be pawed over by their greedy, impatient hands. The tipping point wasn't a single explosive moment of rage. It was a slow, dawning, ice-cold certainty that settled over me as I wiped down the last sticky countertop in the pre-dawn stillness. They would not change. Their apologies, if any were ever offered for the garage or their general disregard, would be hollow, manipulative. Their desire for my demise, for my house, was now an established, spoken fact within their little cabal. As long as I lived in this house, as long as it stood as their anticipated inheritance, I would be subject to their schemes, their disrespect, their chilling impatience for me to be gone. My mind, usually occupied with 18th century political theory or the socioeconomic impact of the spice trade, now focused with laser precision on a new thesis: the complete and utter dismantling of their expectations. They valued this house more than they valued me, more than they valued their father's memory, more than they valued basic human decency. Very well. This house, then, would be the instrument of their education. A plan audacious and absolute began to form. It was not born of passion but of a cold, clear academic fury. A fury that demanded not just an emotional outburst, but a meticulously researched, flawlessly executed strategy. They wanted the house. They had made it the symbol of their greed and my perceived obsolescence. So the house would be the means by which I would reclaim my dignity, my independence, and deliver an unforgettable lesson in consequences. I would sell it. I would sell my house, Henry's house, the repository of our life, and ensure that not one penny of its considerable value ever touched their grasping, undeserving hands. I would sever this unhealthy, toxic tie that bound us together through bricks and mortar. They wished me gone so they could have it. I would make it gone for them permanently. And then I, Vivian Holloway, would be truly free to live whatever remained of my life on my own terms, in a place unmarred by their predatory presence. The decision, once made, brought a strange, almost serene calm. The historian in me appreciated the irony. They had tried to relegate me to the forgotten corners of my own home, to treat me like an artifact whose time had passed. They were about to learn that some artifacts have a way of rewriting the entire exhibit. My research for this new final project would begin at dawn. My first call would be to Eleanor James, my sharpest former PhD student, now a formidable estates lawyer. The second to the most reputable auction house in the city. The cold light of dawn following that night of ultimate humiliation in my own kitchen found me not weeping, but meticulously reviewing my address book. My fury had coalesced overnight into a diamond-hard point of purpose. They wanted my house, wished me dead for it, treated me as less than human within its walls. Very well. They would learn the true value of things, and the bitter cost of disrespecting a mind they had so foolishly deemed obsolete. My first call was not to a grief counselor, but to Eleanor James. Eleanor had been one of my brightest PhD students in the history department years ago, a woman whose intellect I'd always admired. She had since become one of the city's most formidable estates lawyers, known for her sharp mind and unwavering ethical compass. We kept in touch sporadically, a Christmas card here, a brief chat at a university function there. Professor Holloway? Vivian. What a wonderful surprise. Eleanor's voice, when she came on the line, was as warm and intelligent as I remembered. Eleanor, my dear, I said, my own voice calm, almost detached, the historian in me already cataloging the necessary facts. I find myself in a rather complex situation regarding my property and my children. I require your expertise and your discretion. We met the following afternoon in her modern minimalist office, a world away from the cluttered comfort of my own study. I laid out the events of the past few years, culminating in the horror of the garage dinner, Lily's innocent, devastating words, and the subsequent expectation that I clean up their mess. I spared no detail of Reggie and Chantel's condescending entitlement, Lena and Greg's passive complicity, or the dawning, chilling realization that they were, quite literally, waiting for me to die so they could possess my home. I spoke not with hysteria, but with the cold precision of an academic presenting a well-researched paper. Eleanor listened intently, her expression shifting from polite concern to barely concealed outrage. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, her fingers steepled. Vivian, she said finally, her voice tight with controlled anger, what you have described is not just familial disrespect. It borders on and in some aspects constitutes severe emotional and potentially financial elder abuse, given their designs on your property and their clear disregard for your well-being. Your decision to take action is not just understandable, it is necessary. I want to sell the house, Eleanor, I stated, my gaze unwavering. And I want to ensure that not a single penny from its sale, nor any other part of my or Henry's estate, ever finds its way into their hands. Eleanor nodded. Legally, Vivian, the house is in your name. You have every right to sell it. As for the proceeds and your will, we can structure things to ensure your wishes are ironclad. She then outlined the steps. A formal market appraisal, engaging a reputable auction house for a swift and transparent sale, updating my will, and perhaps establishing a trust for my future security, managed by professionals far from the reach of grasping children. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in quiet, meticulous execution. My children, when they bothered to call or visit, found me more withdrawn, often resting, as I'd tell them. They mistook my focused silence for resignation, perhaps even a decline following the unfortunate dinner incident, as Chantal had dismissively termed it to Lena on a phone call I'd accidentally overheard from my study extension, another of Robert's old-fashioned but useful installations. Their condescension was almost palpable. "Poor Mom, she's really not herself these days," Reggie would say to Chantal, loud enough for me to hear, before launching into some new complaint about the dated wallpaper in the hallway. Little did they know my not being myself involved hours spent in my study, not just with my beloved history books, but with property reports, auction house brochures, and legal documents Eleanor James had prepared. I researched comparable sales in the neighborhood like a scholar preparing for a dissertation defense. I interviewed representatives from 2 auction houses, my questions precise, my demeanor that of a seasoned negotiator, not the frail old woman my children perceived. I chose Prestige Estates auctioneers, known for their discretion and their ability to attract serious, high-value bidders. There were moments, of course, usually late at night, when the enormity of what I was doing would wash over me. This house, it held everything. Henry's laughter, the children's first steps, decades of Christmases, the scent of his pipe tobacco still faintly clinging to the velvet curtains in his study. To dismantle it, to sell it off to strangers, felt like a betrayal of him, of us. But then I would remember Lily's innocent pronouncement, the chilling echo of my son wishing me dead for a swimming pool. I would remember the cold damp of the garage, the smear of their leftover gravy on plates I was expected to wash. And my resolve would harden like tempered steel. This wasn't about destroying memories, it was about protecting them from further desecration, about ensuring that the legacy Henry and I built would not be squandered by their greed or tarnished by their disrespect. I signed the auction contract with a steady hand. The date was set for a Saturday 6 weeks hence, a date I knew my children would be out of town for a long weekend getaway. Chantal had been loudly planning a much-needed break from all the family stress, she'd announced with a pointed look in my direction. Perfect. My master plan, as I'd begun to call it in the privacy of my journal, was unfolding with the quiet precision of a well-oiled clock. My children saw an aging, increasingly irrelevant academic, lost in her books and her memories. They had no inkling that this old historian was about to deliver her most impactful lecture yet, one on the subject of consequences, with their family home as the primary and soon-to-be liquidated teaching aid. The Saturday chosen for the auction dawned with a crisp, clear autumn sky, the kind of day Henry and I used to cherish for long walks and talks about everything and nothing. My children, Reggie, Chantal, Lena, and Greg, who were, as anticipated, away on their long weekend getaway to some overpriced spa resort Chantal had insisted upon, a trip no doubt financed by their expectations of future windfalls. Their casual departure a few days earlier, full of patronizing reminders for me to take it easy, Mom, and don't forget your pills, had only cemented the rightness of my audacious plan. They were so wrapped up in their own superficial lives, so convinced of my decline and irrelevance, that the thought of me orchestrating something of this magnitude was simply beyond their comprehension. Eleanor James, my astute lawyer and former student, had advised against me attending the auction in person. "It might be too emotionally fraught, Vivian," she'd said gently, "and your presence, if recognized, could inadvertently complicate matters if your children were to somehow get wind of it prematurely. I had reluctantly agreed, though a part of me, the historian, yearned to witness this significant turning point firsthand. Instead, I arranged to spend the day at Martha's, my sister's quiet apartment across town, with Eleanor promising to call me the instant the gavel fell. The hours ticked by with an agonizing slowness. Martha, bless her understanding heart, tried to distract me with tea and talk of her garden club, but my mind was elsewhere, back on Chestnut Street, in the rooms that held the entirety of my adult life. I pictured strangers walking through Henry's study, their eyes assessing the built-in bookshelves not for the wisdom they held, but for their repurposing potential. I imagined them in my sunny kitchen, discussing where to put their oversized refrigerator, oblivious to the countless family meals, the shared laughter and tears, that had seasoned its very walls. A wave of profound sadness washed over me, a grief for the physical vessel of my memories, even as the cold fire of my resolve burned steadily beneath. This was a necessary amputation, a painful severing to save the whole. Just after 2 o'clock, my old granny phone, the one my children had mocked, rang with Eleanor James's distinct professional tone. I snatched it up, my hand trembling. "Vivian," Eleanor said, her voice calm but with an underlying note of triumph. "It's done. The house is sold." I closed my eyes, a shudder running through me. "Sold?" I whispered. "To whom? For how much?" "To a young family, a doctor and a lawyer with 2 small children, looking to restore a historic home," Eleanor replied. "They fell in love with its character, Vivian. They even asked about the history of the previous owners. They seemed genuinely respectful. That, at least, was a small comfort. And the price, my dear Professor Holloway," she continued, a smile now evident in her voice, "exceeded even our most optimistic appraisal by a rather significant margin. It seems Chestnut Street is even more desirable than we thought. The funds will be in your new private account by Monday morning, once the initial deposits clear." A sum that made me gasp. A sum that represented not just the market value of bricks and mortar, but the culmination of a lifetime of hard work, of careful stewardship, of love poured into every floorboard and rosebush. And it was all mine. Mine to control, mine to dispense, or mine to keep far from the grasping hands of my entitled children. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Thank you for everything." After the call, Martha hugged me, her eyes shining. "You did it, Vivian," she said. "You truly did it. Henry would be proud." Would he? I wondered. Proud of me for dismantling our life sanctuary? Or would he, like me, be heartbroken by the avarice and cruelty of our own children that had made such a drastic measure necessary? Perhaps both. What I did know was that I had acted to protect his legacy from being squandered by their greed, and to protect my own dignity from being further trampled. The unforgettable lecture in loss, as I had privately termed this chapter, was now fully prepared. My children, so fixated on what they believed was their guaranteed inheritance, so dismissive of the woman who was its current custodian, were about to learn a harsh lesson. They had lost something far more valuable than just a house and its monetary worth. They had lost their mother's trust, their connection to their family's true history, and any claim to the love and respect they had so carelessly thrown away. They had made me eat alone in the garage, a symbol of my worthlessness in their eyes. Now they would discover that the worthless old woman held all the cards, and she had just played her winning hand. A strange mix of emotions swirled within me. A profound sadness for the finality of it all, a grim satisfaction at the justice I had engineered, and a surprising, liberating lightness. The house, with its weight of memories and their heavy expectations, was gone. The proceeds were mine, a tangible symbol of my reclaimed independence. My next lecture, I decided, would be delivered from a significant distance, perhaps in the form of a very concise, very clear letter, once I was safely ensconced in my new, as yet undetermined future. For now, I allowed myself a small, bittersweet smile. The gavel had fallen not just on a piece of property but on an era of disrespect. And a new chapter, one entirely of my own making, was about to begin. The Monday morning after the auction, with the substantial proceeds safely nestled in a newly opened bank account known only to me and Eleanor James, I sat in the anonymous bustle of the International Airport Lounge, a one-way ticket to Paris tucked securely in my handbag. My earthly possessions, or what little I truly cherished beyond my books and Henry's papers, had been discreetly shipped ahead or were accompanying me. The rest, the furniture they'd coveted, the knickknacks they'd dismissed, had been sold along with the house, their value now part of my newfound independence. Before boarding my flight, I composed a concise, carefully worded email. The recipients: Reginald, Chantal, Lena, and Greg. The subject line: regarding the property at 12 Chestnut Street. Dear children, I wrote, the term feeling foreign and detached even as I typed it. This is to formally notify you that the property at 12 Chestnut Street was sold at public auction on Saturday last. As the sole legal owner, the proceeds from this sale are now under my exclusive stewardship. Your expectations regarding this property as a future inheritance or a venue for your social engagements were, it appears, regrettably premature and ill-founded. I trust this clarifies the situation. I wish you all the best in finding alternative arrangements for your future family gatherings and financial aspirations. Sincerely, Vivian Holloway. I pressed send, then switched off my old granny phone, the one that had served its purpose so admirably, and dropped it into the airport recycling bin. My new simple smartphone, purchased for this new life, remained off for now. I needed no immediate reply, no torrent of their inevitable shock and fury to mar the quiet dignity of my departure. I could picture it though. Reggie's face turning puce with rage as he read the email, Chantal's screech of disbelief, Lena's panicked tears, Greg's bewildered calculations of lost future assets. There would be frantic calls to my old number, then to Eleanor James, who was under strict instruction to confirm only the legality of the sale and my wishes regarding privacy. They would rage, they would accuse, they would perhaps even try to paint me as senile, manipulated, or cruel. Let them. Their opinions, their outrage could no longer touch me. An ocean would soon be between us. Paris welcomed me with a soft autumn drizzle and the timeless beauty I had only ever read about in Henry's beloved art history books. My small apartment in the Latin Quarter, chosen for its proximity to ancient libraries and quiet cafes, was filled with sunlight and the scent of old paper and fresh coffee. It was bliss. I, Vivian Holloway, retired professor of history, was finally in a city that revered history, that valued the quiet pursuit of knowledge, that didn't see age as an embarrassment but as a repository of wisdom. My days found a new, peaceful rhythm. Mornings were spent wandering through the Louvre or the Musée d'Orsay, reacquainting myself with old masters, discovering new ones. Afternoons were for reading in the Luxembourg Gardens, or for attending lectures at the Sorbonne, a delighted, anonymous scholar among other eager minds. Evenings often found me in a small bistro, a glass of good red wine in hand, a journal open before me, finally writing not of familial betrayal, but of art, of history, of the unexpected vibrant beauty of this new chapter. I thought of my children, of course. A mother's heart, however battered, does not simply cease to love. There was a lingering sadness for the relationship that had curdled into such ugliness, for the grandchildren who would now grow up without knowing me as they might have. But the sharp personal pain, the humiliation of that garage dinner, the chilling confirmation of their wish for my demise, had begun to recede, replaced by a profound, almost academic understanding of their failings, their greed, their entitlement, their tragic lack of empathy. About a month after my arrival, I found a particularly beautiful postcard of the Sainte-Chapelle, its stained glass windows a symphony of light and color. On the back I wrote a single clear sentence addressed to Reggie but meant for them all. An education can be expensive. Consider the sale of Chestnut Street your final, comprehensive lesson in valuation, specifically, the value of respect, dignity, and a mother's love. I trust you have all learned something profound. I signed it simply, Vivian. As I dropped it in the post box, I felt a final, quiet click of closure. My granny's truth had been delivered, not in a torrent of angry words, but in a decisive, life-altering action and a single, irrefutable lesson. They had sought to diminish me, to relegate me to the refuse heap of their ambitions. Instead, I had auctioned off their arrogant entitlement and, with the proceeds, purchased my freedom, my peace, and a vibrant new life in a city of light. They had underestimated the old professor. They had forgotten that history is filled with quiet revolutions led by those deemed powerless. And I, Vivian Holloway, was finally, blissfully living my own. An ocean away, their world might be filled with the bitter taste of consequences. Mine was filled with the rich aroma of freshly baked bread, ancient books, and the unassailable peace of a well-earned, intellectually stimulating and entirely self-determined future.